to let this person share here. We have Guillaume Bignon, who as recently was on my show to critique Braxton Hunter, Leighton Flowers, and Tim Stratton. One Frenchman versus one French Calvinist versus three libertarians, and he was a tour de force in his critiques. And I thought a tour de force. I can't even. I'm not even gonna try. But he is saying, "All right, let me crash this Calvinist love fest." Eli, will you ask vocab my question? So he has a question for you.
Tell him his question is misguided because Calvinists have no love.
That's right. And he is asking me to read the question with a French accent. And this, this might actually make me lose my viewership. So
you're not French, are you?
I'm Puerto Rican, bro.
Oh, I didn't think so.
It's like, if you don't provide additional premises, then it seems you're committing a non sequitur because the biblical nature of the triune nature of the transcendental creator. I can't. That's too much. Let me try it on my regular.
That's pretty good though, bro.
Bro, I couldn't keep it consistent. It just feels awkward. And his question's too long. Maybe I can get away with it if it was a shorter question. But oh my goodness. All right. So here's his question. He says, if you don't provide the additional premises, then it seems you're committing a non sequitur because the biblical nature and triune nature of that transcendent creator don't immediately follow from the laws of logic and morality. But if you provide additional premises, then how is it different from the classical two-step approach? Basically, if I can guess what Guillaume is thinking here, he is thinking in terms of the transcendental argument and the attempt by many presuppositionalists to demonstrate the truth of the Christian God via a transcendental argument. Do you want to address that? And maybe I'll give my 2 cents. Or
I mean, if I start talking, I'll just be saying stuff that's probably not totally relevant to what he's saying. I mean, I have. You know, it's funny. I mean, so Guillaume is like a legit philosopher, right? You know, I've hung out with him. He's
I apologize. You know. He had an extra point there. I didn't read that part.
Oh no.
I apologize.
He really expects us to do. Guillaume, this is what you can do. I can't do this. Can you break down the transcendental argument in 2 steps? 1. Wait, no, it's not 1, isn't it? The existence of the laws of logic and morality until the existence of a transcendent creator. And step, this transcendent creator must be the triune God because of other good premises we provide.
Right. I think if I can give my 2 cents here is
please do.
There are extra steps in a transcendental argument if you formulate a transcendental argument within a deductive context. So if I were going to give a transcendental argument deductively, we can say something like this: premise 1, if knowledge is possible, then the Christian worldview is true. Premise 2, knowledge is possible. Conclusion, therefore, the Christian worldview is true. And so the transcendental premise there that's going to be at issue when you're presenting it deductively like that is going to be the first premise. And so I'm going to have to defend the premise that the acquisition of knowledge is only possible given the entire Christian package. And so how would we unpack that? You'd have to go through various premises and things like that. But that's if you form the argument within a deductive structure. You have to understand that what I said at just a few moments ago, when we argue presuppositionally, we're not arguing up to God, rather we are arguing from God. The argument transcendentally is that if you do not start with the triune God that already has within that the Christian worldview, the packaged in concepts of oneness and manyness and his revelation and how that relates to human beings. When we speak of the triune God, that presupposition, that transcendental presupposition is the entire package. So the indirect method of defending the transcendental argument is don't assume that, and you couldn't even justify inductive principles, deductive principles, or any principles of rationality at all. And so there are also 2 sides of the presuppositional approach. We can use an indirect proof, which is traditionally what transcendental arguments try to do, at least as Bonson presented in Van Til. But we could also use the vocabulary that Gordon Clark used of providing a positive construction, so that when someone says, but I don't see the connection as to how the triune God grounds all these things, then we can lay out what was our metaphysical and epistemological starting point, the Bible, and talk about what God has said about himself and draw those connections within the context of a discussion. So that's a very compact response to the question, but of course that'd be way beyond the scope of our show here to address it in more detail. But go ahead, vocab.
Yeah, that works for me. You know, Guillaume comes on here. I mean, aren't you supposed to be at Wall Street right now or doing something like that, Guillaume? Aren't you supposed to be like in New York walking around in your loafers looking down on the plebes or something like that? but maybe social distancing doesn't allow that. I don't know. But with all seriousness, there's a certain, I could be wrong on this, but there's a certain way in which I almost notice a strange hesitancy. And it's weird. I almost end up sharing this for like legit presuppers to actually give arguments for God's existence. It's almost like, hey, look, God exists. Now let's hold your worldview up against mine and all that the triune God of Scripture existing, all that entails, and let's find out what happens. And that's where the collision comes in. And as we push the antithesis, we have the confidence and know that it's going to be the case that there is no competing worldview of any sort or any variety that at the end of the day is going to be able to withstand proper scrutiny and win in a sense. As far as a worldview, doesn't mean any given debate or anything like that. And so it's kind of almost like that's why there's this very indirect argument that's like, we know Christianity is true by the impossibility to the contrary. The idea of everything else is, and I see like a lot of people, there seems to be a hesitancy for presuppers, unless I'm wrong, you know, to even necessarily formulate even tag, which is sometimes thought of as an argument for the existence of God, and a traditional syllogism. It's almost like, well, let me show you what it means that gods exist, and it's an interesting thing. I don't know if that's exactly what you were saying. And Guillaume is a whole nother level. You probably you said you've already interviewed him, because it seems like you probably should really interview him and have this discussion, not me.
Well, we did interview him on the topic of as he would say, Calvinism and the philosophy. So we didn't talk about apologetic methodology. However, we have spoken on the phone over our disagreements, and we had a very nice, respectful conversation in which we just disagreed on various points. But again, that might be due to just the difficulty of navigating the topic. The ambiguity of, as you mentioned before, there's been a hesitancy of presuppositionalists trying to formulate the transcendental argument in that way. Traditionally, it's often been understood as a disjunctive syllogism and not necessarily a deductive argument. But you have people who kind of fall on different spectrums there. But thank you for the question, Guillaume.